On a white background, a stick figure illustration of a woman with wavy short hair fades in. The illustrations throughout are colored with a pink to purple gradient.
Imagine a world where you trusted your ideas and felt confident about your work.
A light bulb appears over her head and the stick figure smiles.
Imagine feeling excited about sharing your ideas in meetings and collaborating with your teammates.
A woman with straight hair and a man with short hair fade in on either side of her, gesturing to her with smiles.
Imagine feeling on fire creatively, in the flow, and deeply inspired by what you're capable of doing.
The light bulb above her head transforms into a star. In the real world, Denise, our instructor, sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk. She sports short hair, dangling geometric earrings and a gray blazer.
What if I told you that you could be in this state more often and more easily? Wouldn't that be wonderful? However, if you're like most people, you probably have a voice inside of your head that's all too happy to remind you that your ideas aren't good enough.
She counts on her fingers.
Creative enough or unique enough. Or even that you haven't accomplished enough. That you'll never be as successful as the people around you, and that at any moment, you'll be found out as a fraud.
On the white background, the stick figure woman looks up to a thought bubble. In it, she has her arms crossed and is frowning. An exclamation point is above her head.
Take heart. These messages don't come from you. They started when you were young as a means of protection. This voice is known as the inner critic.
The words inner critic fade in at the top left.
I have great news. You do not have to listen to this voice forever.
The thought bubble and words fade away. The stick figure smiles. In the real world, Denise, our instructor, speaks to us.
I'm gonna expose the inner workings of this self-sabotaging force. And I'll reveal the powerful mental abilities that you already possess so that you can unleash your creativity and express your brilliance. I'm Denise Jacobs, international keynote speaker, trainer, and author.
In the bottom left corner, a graphic fades in, showing Denise's name and titles as she lists them.
And I've devoted the last 10 years studying how to unblock creativity. So join me in my LinkedIn learning course and discover how you can silence the voice of self-doubt and start doing your best work now.
She smiles. The image fades to black. On a white background, a stick figure man slides up. He sports a short beard and a pink shirt. He poses with a small smile and his hands on his hips.
What do you think blocks us from getting into creative flow?
Icons pop up as Denise lists elements. They're colored with a gradient from pink to purple. First gears pop in, then tools, an icon of 3 stick people, and finally, a calendar.
Is it your processes? Your tools? Is it your teammates or your managers? Is it the ever-moving deadlines?
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
What if our biggest block to doing our best work isn't anything outside of ourselves? What if the biggest block to doing our best work was in our heads? Think about it. Have you ever heard an internal voice that says things like, I'm not talented enough, or I'm not creative enough, or even, what if someone laughs at my idea? Or you think, everyone else on my team is so much more talented than I am. It's this voice that stands in the way of us fully accessing our brilliance and doing our best work. It takes up our mental bandwidth and hijacks our decision-making. This voice is the inner critic.
On the white background, the stick man stands smiling. A thought bubble pops up featuring the stick man with his arms crossed and a frown. An exclamation point sits over his head.
Sometimes the voice of the inner critic is just an insistent nagging over your shoulder. Sometimes the voice is loud and demands all of your attention.
Another thought bubble pops up on his left side. It's bigger than the first, and in it, his inner critic is frowning harder. The man looks to the bigger thought bubble.
And sometimes it shows up as a committee of hypercritical voices weighing in on every perceived misstep and mistake at the same time.
A third thought bubble appears in the center space above his head with 4 men with their arms crossed. Denise returns.
Maybe for you, it's none of those things. It's just this small, recurrent voice of negativity that invariably shows up when you're trying to do your most impressive work. How can we move forward and do amazing work when we've got an insistent nagging or a committee of judges in our heads? How can we show up in our power? How can we let our brilliance shine through? The answer is, we can't.
In the white space, the stickman's thought bubbles fade away into text reading, average ideas, no challenges, no innovation.
Under the influence of this voice, we stick to safe solutions and average ideas. We don't step up to challenges that would expand our expertise or our experience. We don't push our thinking or the thinking of that of our team. We don't innovate or encourage others to do so.
Denise returns.
The inner critic is the source of our creative blocks, keeping us from accessing our ideas and letting them out into the world. But imagine for a moment that voice in the background being gone. Imagine what you would be able to accomplish and create if you didn't doubt yourself, and you were more frequently in a state of feeling confident and empowered about your ideas and your ability to problem solve. Imagine the quality of the ideas that would come forth and how you would be able to execute them. And then, because you probably work on a team or at least collaborate with others, imagine what it would be like to work with other people whose inner critic was silent. Imagine the ideation, the collaboration, and creative synergy you would have with other people who are also letting out their brilliant ideas. Throughout this course, you'll learn how to silence your inner critic, and I'll help you to reclaim the power, passion, and energy that's on the other side.
She smiles. The image fades to black. Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk. She speaks to us.
As someone whose mission it is to help people to unleash their creativity and do their best work,
As she speaks, she generally gestures with her hands.
My main concern with the inner critic is this. The inner critic blocks creative thinking and the ability to generate new ideas. This is not speculation, by the way. Neuroscientist Charles Lim has done studies that show that the inner critic can be pinpointed in the brain.
On a white background, illustrations fade in, featuring pink and purple colors. A simplistic musician wearing a bow tie plays the trumpet as music notes sit over his head.
He works with jazz instrumentalists and hip-hop artists, and he discovered that while these folks are improvising, a certain area of the brain called the lateral prefrontal cortex essentially goes quiet from lowered activity.
The image of the man zooms in. The label, lateral prefrontal cortex, appears and an arrow points from it to a highlighted spot in his brain.
This is the part of the brain that's in charge of self-monitoring and evaluation, self-judgment, decision-making, behavior modification, and self-control.
As each of these functions is mentioned, they fade in on the left side of the screen in a list. Self-monitoring, self-judgment, decision-making, behavior modification, and self-control.
Sounds like the inner critic, right?
Denise returns.
In contrast, the parts that are associated with the lack of inhibition and self-expression are far more active, as are the parts that generate new ideas. Ideas start flowing when self-imposed mental barriers have been removed. We always have mental connections, partially formed ideas, and fully formed concepts in our heads. But in order for them to come out, we have to learn how to get out of our own way. So here's what to remember.
The image of the musician and list of lateral prefrontal cortex functions reappear.
When the part of the brain that's in charge of self-doubt, self-judgment, and behavior modification is active, creativity can't happen. It just can't. When you're confident, self-assured, and trust yourself to come up with solutions, your thinking is less inhibited and it becomes easier to get into creative flow.
The highlight on the musician's brain shrinks and the music notes over his head get bigger. Denise returns.
In other words, when you're doing your best work, it's usually because the inner critic is silent. So let's learn how to remove the creative block of the inner critic so that we can release our powerful creative selves and start doing our best work more easily and more consistently.
She smiles. The image fades to black. Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
Based on the research that I've done, plus a lot of personal experience in the field, I can tell you that the inner critic comes from the combination of three things.
On a white background, illustrations fade in of a stick figure with curly hair and a pink shirt. A label reads, "Fears." Above the figure on the right, a smaller version of the same figure points down at them with a frown. A label reads, "Ourselves." All illustrations are colored with pink, purple, and a gradient of the two.
First is the fears that we have about ourselves. That is, the things that we're afraid are true about ourselves.
A group of three figures fade in over the main figure's head, all pointing down at them. A label reads, "Other people."
Next is the negative things that we've heard from other people. And last,
on the left, a computer fades in with frowning people on screen pointing at the main figure.
Are the negative messages that society tells us about ourselves, particularly in relationship to other people.
Denise returns.
Here's how it works. The inner critic is born from the fears that we have about ourselves that are triggered, exacerbated, and strengthened by the negative things that we hear from other people. When people in positions of authority, parents, teachers, siblings, especially in our early years,
in the white space, an illustration of a brain fades in. On it, sticky notes appear, reading, "I'm not good enough, I'm not special, I'm not creative, and I'm lazy."
But also bosses, managers, and others say something negative to us. These strong messages go directly into our minds and psyches, and they stick.
Denise returns.
But the inner critic doesn't only come from people who are close to us. It also develops from messages drawn from a larger societal context. If you grow up in an environment that doesn't support who you are in some way, shape, or form, then there's also a good chance that you're going to have a really strong inner critic because of this. Now let's figure out how your personal version of the inner critic shows up. Here's a technique to recognize your own inner critical thoughts. Just finish these sentences.
In the white space, a pink and purple gradient bar appears at the bottom of the frame. As each phrase is spoken, they appear on screen.
I'm not blank enough. Or, I can't blank because I'm not as blank as others. I shouldn't blank because I haven't blank. I blank because my ideas blank.
In the real world, Denise gestures.
You can fill in the blanks however you want. There are no wrong answers. I guarantee that once you fill those in, though, you'll absolutely start hearing and getting in touch with your inner critical voice. Can you see now how harmful the inner critic can be? And not just to your sense of self, but also how you perform at work and correspondingly in your career? Now that we're starting to recognize the voice of your inner critic, let's learn what we need to do to silence it long term.
The image fades to black. Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
Much of our inner critic is subconscious and deeply ingrained. So realistically speaking, we can't ever make the inner critic go away completely. However, we do have the capacity to both recognize when it shows up and to intentionally shift our brains out of debilitating inner critical thoughts into more supportive and productive ones. How do we do this?
Denise gives a little fist pump.
Science! We have abilities that we were literally born with that we can use to change our brains, what I like to think of as mental power tools. We don't have to do anything special to get these. All we have to do is to learn how to cultivate them and make them stronger.
On a white background, a pink and purple bar pops up at the bottom of the screen. A title reading, Mental Power Tools, shifts up to the upper left.
So what are these mental power tools? They are neuroplasticity, mindfulness, and self-compassion.
As Denise says each of the following tools, they appear, adding to a list under the title. Neuroplasticity, mindfulness, and self-compassion. Denise returns.
In combination, they can effectively dismantle and start to banish your inner critic.
On a white screen, the pink and purple slides into the bottom. Text reads, Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change in response to different stimuli.
The first is neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change in response to different stimuli.
Denise returns.
The inner critic is a product of habitual thinking, and thinking is the firing of neurons in a particular pattern. When we make an effort to change a pattern of habitual thinking by thinking new, different thoughts, we alter the old pattern of firing neurons, which effectively creates a new mind frame. As sentient beings, we don't run solely on instinct and habit.
A new white screen appears. Text on it reads, Mindfulness, the ability to be aware of our thoughts.
This is where mindfulness, the ability to be aware of our thoughts, comes into play. We can willfully choose where to direct our brain power.
Denise returns.
And this initiates the process of changing our brains for the better. And as social beings, we all have the ability to show compassion to others.
A new white screen appears. Text reads, Self-compassion, the ability to direct our thoughts and actions of kindness toward ourselves.
When we direct our innate thoughts and actions of kindness and caring to ourselves and exercise self-compassion, we relate to ourselves in a more supportive way.
In her workspace, Denise perks up.
So, by mindfully and deliberately choosing different thoughts that involve self-compassion, we put the brain's neuroplasticity to work to create a whole new mind frame, one where the inner critic is less active and, as a result, silenced. This is how the mental power tools of neuroplasticity, mindfulness, and self-compassion can work together to banish your inner critic. Let's start learning how to use them for good.
She smiles. The image fades to black. Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
The first power tool is something that our brains do all the time naturally. It's neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to change and adapt in the face of new or different kinds of stimuli. In other words, it's learning. This is great news for our intention of banishing the inner critic. The brain's capacity for neuroplasticity means that we have the power to intentionally change habitual negative thought patterns for the better.
On a white background, pink and purple illustrations fade in, showing a simply drawn woman with pink pants and hair walking on a path toward a forest. A sign by the path reads, "Recurring thoughts." It points toward the forest.
When we have a regular thought pattern, it creates a well-worn path in the brain, much like a path in the woods.
Denise speaks to us, generally gesturing with her hands.
The more we think a thought, the stronger the mental pathways and networks become, and the more easily those thought patterns get triggered, whether it's positive or not.
The illustration reappears.
But when we recognize a negative thought pattern, we can start directing our brains towards different thoughts.
The sign disappears from the path, and the woman stands in front of a gate reading, "Closed," that blocks off the path.
With time and practice, your new thoughts will get stronger, and the old thought patterns will start to fade with disuse.
Denise returns.
Because what you think about is determined by what you pay attention to, the really cool thing about neuroplasticity is that it can be directed and managed through attention and focus. In fact, training your attention has been called the gateway to neuroplasticity.
In the white space, a diagram of a brain from the side fades in.
Brain imaging shows that when we pay attention to something,
Plus signs and minus signs appear on the diagram.
not only are the neurons involved activated, but the neuroactivity in other areas is suppressed as a result.
Denise returns.
Let me give you an easy technique to see the power of attention and focus, which I call shift focus.
Denise mimes turning from one direction to another. She raises both her hands with her palms facing toward her.
Hold both hands up in front of your face. Now,
She glances at her left hand.
put all of your focus on one hand.
She looks to her hand. Her gaze turns to us and she smiles.
And also, while you're doing that, I want you to imagine that that hand is holding a whole constellation of negative thoughts that you don't want to be thinking, like, I'm not good enough, or I don't know enough, or they're going to find out that I'm a fraud. Hold all of those thoughts in that hand and then really focus on it for a few more seconds. Then, slowly shift your attention away from that hand to your other hand.
Her head turns and she glances at her right hand.
Imagine that this hand is holding all of the self-supportive thoughts that you would rather be thinking, like, I'm excited that what we're working on will touch so many lives.
She looks to her right hand a moment, then smiles to us.
And focus all of your attention on this second hand. Now, is your first hand still there? Do you care about your first hand now that you're so focused on your second hand? Okay, you can drop your hands now.
Denise drops her hands.
Can you see how what you pay attention to regularly really does determine the content of your thoughts? When you're in a place of thinking thoughts that are unsupportive and negative, you can use this tool. Just put your hands up.
She puts her hands up.
Focus all of your attention on one hand.
Denise looks from her negative hand to her positive hand.
And then shift focus and place your attention on the other hand.
She lets her hands come to rest at her sides and looks to us.
You'll show your brain just how in control of your thoughts you actually are.
The image fades to black. Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk. She speaks to us.
The next power tool is mindfulness. Mindfulness is our ability to be present and aware of where we are and what we're thinking.
On a white background, a pink and purple illustration shows a stick figure man with a diagram of a brain in his head. A title above reads, Mindfulness.
Imagine standing outside of your own mind.
The brain fades out of his head and appears in the air in front of him.
Observing your thoughts and feelings as if they were happening to someone else.
3 thought bubbles appear above the brain, all with ellipses in them.
You're fully aware but impartial, and therefore not caught up in the story that your mind or inner critic is coming up with about the situation. This is being mindful. When we're in this place of observing what we're thinking, then this also means that we can choose our thoughts.
Red X's strike out 2 of the thought bubbles.
This is what makes mindfulness a power tool.
A check mark appears on the remaining bubble and the X's fade away.
The ability to choose one thought over another.
Denise returns.
With mindfulness, we can have the presence of mind to think, oh, I'm doing that inner critic thing again. Okay, I'm going to choose to think something different. Or, even better, we can even accept that we're having self-critical thoughts while also recognizing that just because we're thinking these thoughts doesn't mean that they are true. That is true mind mastery. I'm going to give you a useful tool to raise your awareness of how you can use mindfulness to dismiss inner critical thoughts so that you can avoid the mental distractions that the inner critic creates. We have a lot of thoughts that we can be thinking during the course of the day. Let's be intentional about which thoughts we entertain through mindful thought acceptance.
The illustration reappears, showing the stick man smiling at the thought with a check mark on it over his brain.
We can use mindfulness to practice viewing our inner critical thoughts with detachment.
The ellipses in the thought bubbles become the words, brain events.
Rather than seeing our critical thoughts as the truth about ourselves or a situation, we will think of them as brain events.
Denise speaks to us, gesturing as she does.
By seeing our inner critical thoughts as more of a habitual reflex of the mind, we can then begin to dismiss these thoughts as products of misfiring circuitry and again, choose not to react to them. When your inner critic comes up, instead of getting all wrapped up in the thoughts of self-judgment, self-criticism, or self-doubt, you can think to yourself,
the illustration returns, this time with 2 of the thought bubbles labeled inner critic.
Oh, my inner critic circuit is running again. And then shift your attention back to what you were doing.
A check mark appears on the thought bubble with ellipses in it. Denise returns.
By doing this, you can divert the whole thought cascade that used to happen. This simple practice will also prevent you from activating the emotions that had been your typical response to inner critical thoughts, and will leave your mind clear for improved creative thinking.
She smiles. The image fades to black. Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
The last power tool is self-compassion. Now, sometimes with self-compassion, people will say, oh, that's not tangible. It's all touchy-feely and emotional. But it turns out that self-compassion is incredibly powerful.
A slide with a white background is titled Self-Compassion in pink text. To the right, a pink and purple sketched hand faces palm up at a red heart. Bullet points appear on the slide as she speaks.
First off,
correlated to achieving mastery in your field.
Self-compassion is correlated with achieving mastery in your field and with optimal performance.
Encourages higher self-standards.
Also, when you really start to build up your levels of self-compassion, you will develop higher standards for yourself and you'll work harder through enhanced motivation. From an emotional standpoint, self-compassion helps us to maintain our mental equilibrium.
Helps maintain mental equilibrium. We return to the instructor.
Because it activates our built-in caregiving system and encourages the release of oxytocin, it helps us to feel more secure and accepted when we're feeling inadequate.
Another white slide appears, this time with the stick figure in the center. She holds her arms above her head. Her pink and purple hair is in a bun. Her shirt is white with a pink heart. She wears purple pants. Decreases is to the left of her in pink text. Bullet points appear underneath as the instructor speaks. Insecurity.
Self-compassion decreases insecurity, self-consciousness,
Self-comparison.
and the tendency to compare ourselves with others. It lessens
Self-criticism.
self-criticism, depression, and anxiety.
Depression. Anxiety.
Self-compassion increases confidence and helps us to believe that we're worthy and capable.
Increases is to the right of her in pink text. Bullet points appear underneath as the instructor speaks. Confidence, inner worth, ability.
Yes, my friends,
We return to the instructor.
self-compassion can accomplish all of these things. If you feel that you don't know how to activate self-compassion, I have a self-compassion template for you.
Two stick figures appear. The woman on the left has shoulder-length pink and purple hair, a pink shirt and white pants. The male figure on the right has short pink hair, a white shirt and purple pants. A speech bubble appears above the figure on the right and pieces of text appear and disappear. I'm having a hard time. I'm not good enough. I'm a fraud. And I'm a waste of others' time.
Imagine that one of your dearest friends comes to you and says, I'm having a hard time. I don't feel like the work that I do is good enough. I'm afraid that at any moment, people are going to find out that I'm a fraud. And I don't think that I have anything of value to give.
We return to the instructor.
How would you feel towards this friend? You would probably feel sympathy and potentially empathy. Maybe you'd really listen to them and you'd give them the time and care that they needed. What kinds of comforting words and encouraging words would you say to this friend? Have this whole scenario play out in your head. Then take note of and mentally record those feelings, thoughts, and supportive messages. What you exercised in your head is compassion. So this is your template for self-compassion that will replace debilitating self-criticism.
The female stick figure with the shoulder-length hair and a pink top faces a mirror with an ornate pink and purple frame.
From now on, you'll treat yourself with the same kindness and care with which you would treat a friend.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
Did you know that in the Tibetan language, there's actually no word for creative? The closest word for creative in this language is the word natural. Within this culture, creativity is so akin to one's essence that there's no individual word for it. I believe that they are onto something. Creativity shouldn't be, or even more accurately, isn't about trying to be creative. Creativity is not about trying or exerting effort.
On a slide with a white background, text reads, "Creativity is being who you are." Being and you are in pink text, the rest of the text is black.
The reality is that creativity is simply about being who you are. We don't have to try to be creative because it's our natural state.
We return to the instructor.
By the way, don't confuse creativity with art. So many people believe that they're not creative because they aren't visual artists or writers, dancers, or musicians. This is such a narrow view of creativity. The truth of the matter is this. Creativity is about bringing something new into being.
On a white background, a horizontal row of stick figures appear one at a time as she speaks. The farthest on the left is balding with longish pink and purple hair and glasses and wears a purple lab coat. He holds a bubbling beaker of pink liquid. Next to him is a smirking female figure with chin-length black hair, pink shirt and white tie. Next to her is a smiling male figure holding a phone who has short pink hair and purple pants. Next to him a similar-looking male figure but with pink and purple hair. They talk to a smiling female figure next to them who also has pink and purple hair, but with pink pants.
This means that people who are technical, analytical, and scientific are creative. People who are talented at business or sales are creative. People who work with finances are creative. People who work with people are creative.
We return to the instructor.
We are all creative. Creativity is so inherent in us that our job is merely to accept that it's there. It's like our ability to breathe. What we do need to do, however, is to recognize how we are creative and then to put effort into developing our natural gifts and talents. Here's a tip on how to find where and how you're creative by recognizing where you lose time.
Bullet points in black text appear on a white background. What can you do for hours?
Think about these things. What can you do for hours and it feels like time is flying by?
What do you like thinking about?
What do you like thinking about and finding out about?
What brings you joy?
What brings you joy?
What feels effortless?
What comes easily to you and feels effortless?
We return to the instructor.
Imagine in your mind's eye the activities that you have done where most or all of those items I listed were present. My friend, you are now on the path to discovering how you are creative.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
I'm sure you've been in a meeting when someone came up with an idea, but immediately afterwards, someone challenged or dismissed it as soon as this idea was shared. They said the 3 words that are some of the fastest creativity killers on the planet. That won't work. Sadly, our fear that sharing our thoughts sets us up for criticism makes us hold ourselves back and censor our ideas. When we self-censor, we make an unconscious choice that inhibits the generation and flow of ideas while making a conscious choice to withhold the ones that we do have.
On a white slide, a title reads, Ideacide in pink text. A female stick figure with chin-length black hair and a pink shirt has a thought bubble with a pink and purple light bulb in it.
This process of self-censoring has been referred to as ideacide.
A target crosshairs center over the thought bubble. The figure pouts as the thought bubble pops.
Because we kill our ideas before they have an opportunity to come to life in the world. When we commit ideacide, we don't push our thinking.
On a different slide with the same title, a pink and purple broken light bulb is on the right. Bullet points appear as the instructor speaks. Limits an idea's potential.
And our ideas stagnate.
Keeps ideas safe and uninspired.
The solutions that we do come up with are safe and uninspired.
Limits our growth.
And what's more, self-censoring keeps us from stepping up to the challenges that would grow our skill set and expertise, and as a result, our self-esteem suffers.
We return to the instructor.
But self-censoring and the ideacide that comes from it is detrimental to more than just our own creativity process. It also affects the people that we work with. When we hold our ideas back because we believe they need to be fully formed and brilliant, then our colleagues are missing out on the ideas that could be the foundation for the group to build upon. Even worse, the group misses out on the magic of collaboration.
The stick figure with the thought bubble returns. She's quickly joined by a female figure with short, curly, black hair and purple pants, and a male figure with short hair and beard wearing a purple shirt. They have thought bubbles. As the instructor speaks, light bulbs appear inside them and more thought bubbles with light bulbs appear all over the screen.
However, when we stop committing ideacide, we start sharing ideas that have the potential to benefit multiple people on multiple levels. We end up opening up the possibility of having a whole chain of ideas developed from a concept that maybe isn't fully formed, but has the potential to spark something great. We push the thinking of our colleagues and our teams to be all that they can be.
We return to the instructor.
You have a choice. Is it more important for you to protect yourself from judgment and to keep what unique perspectives you have inside? Or will you make a deliberate choice to contribute and enrich others' lives as well as your own? Let's commit to making a positive contribution to the greater good by sharing our ideas.
Black text on a white background reads, "Focus on the work."
Here's a useful reframing tool called Focus on the Work.
We return to the instructor.
To find the inspiration and motivation to share your ideas, start by thinking about the potential good that whatever you're creating will do. It may affect one person, it may affect thousands or more. Focus on creating results and helping others, and infuse your work with positive intentions and your vision of its usefulness.
Black text on a white background reads, "Focus on the road ahead."
This will help you to focus on the road ahead instead of the walls of anxiety next to you.
We return to the instructor.
Take a few moments to think about the following couple of things.
A white slide is titled, "Things to Consider." Bullet points appear as the instructor speaks. Who is your audience?
Who are the people that you would like to touch with your ideas and your work? And
how might you improve the lives of others?
How will what you're making improve the lives of others? This approach fully leverages the power of mindfulness.
We return to the instructor.
By choosing to shift your attention away from the unfounded fear of being judged, you can then refocus on the ideas and creativity that you're bringing into the world. Let those big, beautiful ideas inside of you come out. And while you're at it, you'll probably spark great ideas in others as well. It's a win-win situation.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
If you're afraid you can't count on your ability to be creative, or you only seem to come up with good ideas on occasion, or if you just don't feel like you have enough good ideas, then you're suffering from what I call creativity misgivings. The obvious solution is to come up with a lot of ideas regularly. Being a producer of ideas means that we regularly need to work our idea muscle and keep our brains from atrophying.
A quote appears between two horizontal lines with quotation marks. Idea machine. Below them reads the name, James Altucher.
Serial entrepreneur James Altucher refers to this practice of idea therapy as being an idea machine.
We return to the instructor.
So, here's what I recommend. Come up with 10 ideas a day.
She holds up a small notebook reading, Field Book.
Keep a small notebook like a moleskin or field notes and carry it with you everywhere.
A smiling male stick figure with short pink and purple hair and purple pants appears at a desk with a pen and paper. Several thought bubbles with pink and purple light bulbs appear as the instructor speaks.
Every day, write down 10 ideas. That's it.
We return to the instructor.
Now, here is the structure so that you can first silence your inner critic before it gets triggered, especially if you're a perfectionist like I am, and second, so that you can actually stick with the practice. Ready? Your ideas don't have to be good. They don't have to be unique, highly innovative, or visionary. They don't have to be ideas that no one else on the planet has ever come up with before. Take the pressure off. Your ideas can be derivative and lack imagination, or they can even be ridiculous and impractical. If you don't know where to start, here are 3 suggestions to help you focus and generate your ideas more easily.
A white slide is titled Tips for Generating Ideas. Lines appear in a numbered list as the instructor speaks. 1. List things that bother you.
First, you can make bug lists of things that bother you. So every annoyance, every point of friction, everything that rubs you the wrong way hides an opportunity to apply creativity.
We return to the instructor.
It could be in something that you use. It could be in software. It could be in something practical. If you wish something could be different, start jotting down ideas of how you would like it to be.
We return to the slide. 2. List silly, unrealistic, absurd ideas.
Next, what you could do is you could make it the worst. You can try to come up with the worst idea that you possibly can, or ideas that are as silly, unrealistic, or absurd as possible.
3. Ask, what would X person do?
And finally, you could ask yourself, what would X person do? You can channel the spirit of your favorite thinker and innovator and generate ideas like Marie Curie would, or George Washington Carver, or Buckminster Fuller, or Nikola Tesla.
We return to the instructor.
If you feel like you're having problems coming up with 10 ideas, then push yourself to come up with 15 or 20. Remember, the goal is not to have good ideas. The goal is to have ideas, period. It's the practice of writing down your 10 ideas a day that is transformative. Don't let your brain get flabby. Make a commitment to exercise your idea muscle daily. Have fun with the process and enjoy your new creativity health habit.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
When you find that your inner critic is working overtime and your self-talk has turned more negative, then it's time to reboot your self-talk. It's a way to move from being super critical of ourselves and getting to a point where we're feeling better about what we're capable of.
On a white slide titled Self-Talk Reboot in pink text, a numbered list appears as the instructor speaks.
A self-talk reboot has 2 steps.
1. Practice self-distancing by talking to yourself in the third person.
The first step is to do something called self-distancing, where you talk to yourself in the third person. In other words, you refer to yourself by your name.
2. Encourage yourself as a coach or a friend would.
The second part is to encourage yourself like a coach or a friend would. If you've ever had a good coach or a supportive mentor encouraging you and pushing you on to success, then you know exactly what this sounds and feels like. Channel the supportive voice and speak to yourself with it.
We return to the instructor.
Many professional athletes and other high performers use this technique, like LeBron James, for example. In interviews, he has been known to refer to himself in the third person. Knowingly or unknowingly, he's using the self-distancing technique. And if it's good enough for LeBron James, one of the best basketball players in history, it should be good enough for us too. Let me show you how you can be your own coach of positivity. I actually learned a template for how to be my own coach of positivity from a friend several years ago when I was about to give my own very serendipitous TEDx talk that I had only 1 day to prepare for. Before I went on stage, I was panicking. I texted a friend for support. I'm at TEDx, I said, and I go on in 45 minutes. I am so nervous. Not only did he give me the exact words of encouragement that I needed to hear, but he also gave me the perfect template to talk to myself and now to talk to you through similar future situations. Research done by Ethan Koss at the University of Michigan shows that the sequence of doing these 4 things is incredibly effective.
On a white slide titled Self-Talk Reboot Sequence in pink text, a numbered list appears as the instructor speaks. 1. Self-distance. 2. Supportive advice. 3. Self-soothing. 4. Affirming yourself.
Self-distancing, then giving supportive advice, self-soothing, and then affirming yourself.
We return to the instructor.
Doing this reduces anxiety and dramatically improves performance. This is what my friend said to me. He said, "Denise, there is no need to be nervous about this talk. You've done it 100 times before. With this first sentence, remember to self-distance by addressing yourself by your first name, and then provide supportive advice like you would to a friend. Then," he said, "just relax and convey your love of the subject, and people will respond to your passion and enthusiasm. With the second point, make sure to soothe yourself and to tell yourself a truth about the situation." And then finally, he said, "Denise, you're going to do great. Speaking is what you do." With this last point, leverage the power of affirmations. Affirmations actually do work in certain contexts by helping to expand your perception of yourself. I'm happy to say that not only did the talk turn out great, but it ended up being a peak experience for me. And now I have a message that I can play in my head to reassure myself before I'm about to speak. As someone who may be a manager, mentor, parent, and/or coach, you know what it's like to encourage people to get them to be their best. So turn this practice back upon yourself. Start being your own coach of positivity and talk yourself through it.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
When your inner critic pops up to protect you while you're trying to do creative work and let your ideas out into the world, you may have a sense of, why me? During these moments, you may feel opposed upon and stressed. Now, there's 2 kinds of stress. There's negative stress and there's positive stress.
A white slide is titled Negative Stress in pink text.
First, let's look at negative stress, the kind that far too many of us are far too familiar with.
As the instructor speaks, an exclamation point appears with 4 arrows pointing to it. Underneath are the words challenges from external sources in black text.
Negative stress happens when we feel like a challenge has been put upon us and from an external source.
We return to the instructor.
The fear and sense of danger and pressure that comes from it triggers a fight or flight response. Listen to these messages that we often tell ourselves that make us feel stressed and imposed upon.
On the right of a white slide is a sketch of a female stick figure with shoulder-length pink and purple hair and a purple top sitting at a desk with a pink laptop. She pouts with her face resting in her hands. As the instructor speaks, bullet points appear in a list on the left. I have to make the design perfect.
I have to make the design perfect.
I should be more creative.
I should be more creative.
I ought to work more hours.
I ought to work more hours.
A narrow gray box briefly slides in from the left at the bottom, reading, The Now Habit by Neil Fiore.
In the book, The Now Habit, author Neil Fiore says that this kind of self-talk promotes a sense of powerlessness and self-imposed victimhood.
We return to the instructor.
Because it's something that we feel like we have to do and that we're taking on an imposition, I call this mind frame imposition mentality. Now, here's something important to remember. The words that we use have layers of meaning, And because of that, words have power. When we use this kind of language in our self-talk, we're giving up both our power and our responsibility in the situation.
A white slide titled Eustress in pink text has the following text in black. Challenges deliberately taken on that make us feel motivated, confident, and optimistic.
The other kind of stress, positive stress, is known as eustress. In contrast to negative stress, eustress emerges from challenges that we have deliberately taken on, making us feel motivated, confident, and optimistic.
We return to the instructor.
From a brain and body chemistry standpoint, both kinds of stress are actually similar. Each of them produces adrenaline, and both activate the attention centers and reward pathways in the brain. The difference between the two boils down to perception.
An infographic on a white slide shows two beakers, one with pink liquid and a poison symbol over the words negative stress on the left and one with purple liquid and a happy face on it, with the words eustress underneath on the right. Pink liquid moves in a square, U-shaped tube over a female stick character in the center with curly black hair and purple pants. A thought bubble above the figure reads word choice and interrupts the tube. As the liquid passes the thought bubble, the liquid becomes purple and then reaches the eustress beaker.
We can become stress alchemists who transmute negative stress into eustress through the power of word choice.
We return to the instructor.
Let's look at how to switch out of imposition mentality by choosing different words to describe our situation, something that I call say this and not that. If you find yourself sliding into imposition mentality, do like your parents probably told you when you were younger and make good choices by choosing different words.
The slide returns. As she speaks, the thought bubble changes from I have to, I choose to, I get to, and finally, I want to.
Don't know exactly what to say? When you start to recognize that you're saying things like I have to, swap it out and say I choose to, or I get to, or I want to.
Next, the words in the thought bubble change from I must to when can I.
Instead of saying I must, for example, I must do this or I must succeed at this, you can reframe it by saying when can I? For example, you can say when can I put the effort in to make this successful?
Next, the words in the thought bubble change from I will to I decide.
Other power phrases that you can use to reframe your thinking are I will or I decide.
We return to the instructor.
With this change, you'll start to mentally shift into a place of taking back your power because these intentional new phrases indicate both taking ownership of your feelings and also embody a full commitment to action.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
How many times have you received feedback on work that you've done and got lots of positive comments, but it's the one negative one that you remember the most and it plays on auto repeat in your head? There's actually a term for what happens when the brain puts negative thoughts on a replay loop. Have you heard of something called rumination?
On a white slide titled Rumination in pink text, a cow is sketched in black lines with a pink and purple spot on it.
Rumination is a practice that we have in common with animals like cows, camels, and others. When these animals eat, they initially chew their food and swallow it, but then they bring it back up and chew on it several more times.
As the instructor speaks, text appears in black reading, the process of continuously thinking.
Thankfully, we humans don't do that physically with the food that we eat, but we do ruminate mentally with our thoughts.
The slide is replaced by a realistic-looking brain sketched in black. A clockwise circle of overlapping pink and purple arrows appears over it reading, negative, at the top and thoughts at the bottom.
We take a negative memory or something that we're anxious about, and then we'll think about it over and over and over again.
We return to the instructor.
Unfortunately, avoiding rumination is easier said than done. Our brains ruminate very easily, especially when we are tired, stressed, or burned out. And in the current culture of work, who isn't that at least part of the time? There are two kinds of rumination.
On a white slide titled Depressive Rumination in pink text, text appears in black reading, continuously thinking about the past.
One is called depressive rumination, which is when you're thinking about something that happened in the past.
We return to the instructor.
For example, a friend of mine is still being hard on himself for making a mistake on a project he was working on 5 years ago.
On a white slide titled Anxious Rumination in pink text, text appears in black reading, continuously thinking about a potential event.
The other kind of rumination is anxious rumination, which is focused on a potential event that has not yet transpired.
We return to the instructor.
For example, someone may have this running through their brain. I'm so nervous about my big project presentation on Monday. What if they think my work is no good? Then I'm going to get fired, and then I'm going to have to find a new job. There are two things that are helpful to keep in mind for each version of rumination. First, when thinking about something that happened in the past, remember that it's gone, done, and there is absolutely nothing you can do to change it.
On a white background, a sketch appears of a signpost with a pink arrow sign pointing right that reads, Future, and a purple arrow sign pointing left that reads, Past. A male stick figure next to it with short pink hair and purple pants gazes off to the left, with his mouth slightly downturned and his hand to his head. Under the sketch reads the black text, Let go of the past.
Thinking about it obsessively only makes you feel awful. Give your brain permission to let it go.
The sketch flips so that the figure is on the right gazing in the direction of the future. Under it reads, Except that the future is not set.
Second, when you catch yourself ruminating over something in the future, remember that the future is not set in stone.
We return to the instructor.
There's a more than likely chance that the situation won't transpire the way you fear it will. If you're prone to either one or both forms of rumination, this practice of the anti-rumination hand squeeze will help. When you realize that you're in a downward spiral of rumination, do this. Take a squeeze ball.
As she speaks, she holds up a stress ball shaped like a multicolored brain. She squeezes it in her left hand.
And hold it in your non-dominant hand. Squeeze it for several minutes. After a while, you should notice that your thoughts have calmed down. There's actually neuroscience behind this practice. The process of squeezing the ball in your non-dominant hand activates a different part of your brain because you're using a different set of muscles than you're used to. This activity in the new area distracts your brain away from cyclical thinking and makes it focus on the foreign muscle movement instead. Simple, yet effective. So, if you're prone to rumination, get yourself a squeeze ball and make your brain do something different.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
A lot of times, we don't see criticisms coming. But if we have an employee annual review or a meeting with a boss, then we anticipate that within the feedback, invariably, there will be some sort of criticism. And then what do? We spend the time leading up to the event tense and anxious, and during the session, we can barely hear what's said. Because of this, we miss what hidden gems the feedback may hold. Wait, hidden gems? Yes, because not all criticism is negative, even if it seems like it on the surface. Sometimes, even negative criticism can hold a kernel of useful truth. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I shared a great experience that I had had with an acquaintance. When I was done, he went on a rant. He said, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. It was like the Denise show, like all you wanted was an audience. I was shocked by his response, and his words stuck with me for months afterwards. I asked myself, do I really go on and on when I talk and act like it's the Denise show when I'm telling a story? For a couple of years, I became hyper-vigilant about how much I was talking during conversations, careful not to say too much for fear of another similar reprimand. In hindsight, the fascinating thing about this criticism was that there was truth to it. But instead of it being about my weaknesses, it was insight into my strengths and gifts. Now, 20 years after that experience, I am a professional speaker. It is my job to get on a stage, and regardless of the event, during the time of my talk, it essentially is the Denise show. What I do is a perfect fit for my personality and skills.
Words display on a white background. Negative criticism can be positive insight in disguise.
The takeaway? Someone's negative criticism can be positive insight in disguise.
We return to Denise.
In order to truly do our best work, not only in quality, but potentially even in our career path itself, we need to be open to receive the positive truth in feedback and criticisms and learn from them. If we tense up, block, or react negatively to the information given, then we can't hear potentially valuable information clearly, and then won't be able to take in or make use of it.
Words display on a white background. See criticism as a way to grow and learn about yourself.
Consider this reframe. Make an effort to see criticism as a way to grow and learn about yourself. Transform your relationship with criticism and use it as a tool to improve both your professional and personal lives.
We return to Denise.
Let's adopt a practice of becoming curious and staying open in the face of criticism so that we can learn from it. So, if you're in a situation where you know you're going to be receiving feedback of some sort, here's an approach to help you deal with whatever comes to you with ease. However, before you dive into the process, do this mental prep work. First, breathe. Make an effort to stay relaxed so that you don't block the information through being tense, anxious, or defensive. Second, mentally detach. Disconnect whatever criticism you receive from your self-worth, as the person is probably giving feedback on your behavior and not on who you are as a person. Here are 3 pro tips for taking in criticism well and using it to get better at whatever you do.
A list is displayed on a white background. Title, Taking Criticism Well. Number 1, structure the feedback.
1. Structure the feedback. Make sure you get it in a way that works for you. Communicate to the person exactly what kind of feedback you need and how you need it. Tell them the specific things to focus on and let them know the best way to share their thoughts so that you can take it in.
Number 2, be curious.
2. Be curious. Look for what was the most interesting thing that the person said. It could be that they revealed a major insight through that point.
Number 3, listen actively and take notes.
And then finally, 3, listen actively and take notes. Ask questions to gather as much information as possible and structure them for clear responses. For example, you can say things like, "Why do you think that is? Tell me more about that." "Okay, what's your suggestion?"
We return to Denise.
When receiving input, keep in mind that very few people have learned how to give feedback effectively. All they've experienced is feedback from other people who also weren't good at giving feedback. So when you structure the feedback for them, this will subtly teach them how an effective feedback session should function, and everyone wins. So, remember, when you receive suggestions, recognize that you may be getting invaluable information that will help you move forward more effectively.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
When we experience despair from envy and we define ourselves as failures in light of another's success, then we're experiencing the inner critic in the form of comparison syndrome. Many people use the words envy and jealousy interchangeably, but they are actually two distinct emotions.
Over a white background, the title reads, Jealousy. An illustration shows 3 stick figures. A man and a woman lovingly hold hands. Standing apart from them, a man cries. Between the crying man and the couple is a broken heart.
We experience jealousy when we're afraid of losing someone to a perceived rival. Jealousy is always about the relationships between 3 people.
Another illustration is titled, Envy. In it, a happy woman holds up a trophy. Next to her, a man frowns, holds his hand to his face and looks down.
We experience envy when we feel someone else has got something that should rightfully be ours, but we're afraid that we didn't get it because we are deficient in some way.
We return to Denise.
When the inner critic shows up in this form, our envy shackles our creativity by making us ignore or discount our talents. However, there is a gift to envy. Envy, like all strong emotions, has the potential to be a great teacher. Your envy is a message from your psyche showing you a deep desire that you may not have acknowledged. Here's a creative exercise called Opportunity Model. Now, you may look at people that you envy as role models, putting them up on a pedestal and making their accomplishments seem unattainable.
An illustration is titled, Opportunity Model. In it, the 2 figures from the previous illustration both hold up the trophy. They smile.
But now, instead, make them your opportunity model, a person who shows you that what you desire is actually possible for you to achieve, as well as a potential way to do so.
We return to Denise.
Here are 3 steps that you can use to transform the envy of the success of others into a source of inspiration for your own success.
A list appears next to a trophy illustration. It reads, Step 1, Self-soothe.
Step 1, self-soothe. When you find yourself going into a comparison downward spiral, stop and shift into self-compassion and employ active self-soothing. For example, if you find yourself thinking something like, I'm such a loser. Why don't I have more followers on Instagram like my friend Jerry? You can soften it by telling yourself soothing messages instead. For an added bonus, talk to yourself in the third person and use your first name. For example, you could say, Zach, I know you're working as hard as you can to increase your social reach. Maybe you can get Jerry to give you some pointers.
Step 2, Acknowledge.
Step 2, acknowledge. Give the person the same consideration that you would like for yourself. Recognize and acknowledge all of the incredibly hard work that has gone on behind the scenes of their highlight reel, their aggravations, their setbacks, their failures, and yes, even dealing with their own inner critic.
Step 3, Learn.
Step 3, learn. Learn from your opportunity model's achievements and their path to success.
We return to Denise.
What steps has this person taken to achieve their success? Are there parts of their process that you can replicate to achieve success for yourself? You can use these tools to learn from your envy, to extend compassion and understanding, and ultimately reverse comparison syndrome by transforming envy into motivation.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
Often, when we see others succeeding where we haven't yet, we fall into the trap of feeling like a failure by comparison. It turns out that when we don't feel like we are enough in comparison to others, it's because we haven't internalized our own successes and accomplishments. We haven't fully acknowledged what we ourselves have achieved. Humans need rites of passage.
An illustration depicts the stick figure of a woman smiling, and her arms raised in the air. A heart is printed on her shirt. Underneath her reads, "Celebrations help us to recognize when something important has happened."
Celebrations are rites of passage that help us to recognize that something important has happened.
We return to Denise.
We need to direct a laser-like focus towards acknowledging and basking in our own successes. When we're busy celebrating our own efforts, we won't have the mental bandwidth or inclination to compare ourselves with others. One of the things I recommend for you to do is to do a retrospective and to revisit your successes. And then, once you've identified them, celebrate them. Here's how to do it.
A list appears next to a ribbon with a thumbs-up symbol. Title, Successes and Accomplishments. Number 1, take a success inventory.
Step 1, take a success inventory. You may be so in the habit of barely taking heed of your successes as they rush past you, and then you forget them almost as quickly as you achieved them. First, get in touch with both your small and large successes so that you can celebrate both. Go back into your calendar and look at the past 1 to 5 years. For each month or year, try to remember.
A point form list reads, what did you initiate or complete? What abilities and knowledge did you develop or acquire? What challenges and obstacles did you overcome? What are you most proud of?
What did you initiate or complete? What abilities and knowledge did you develop or acquire? What challenges and obstacles did you overcome? What are you the most proud of? Don't worry if you can't remember everything perfectly. The goal is to bring to mind as many successes as you can. Now you know what to reward yourself for. It's time to actually treat yourself.
Successes and accomplishments. Number 2, reward and celebrate.
So step 2 is to reward and celebrate. How will you celebrate? The choices are endless. Here are some tips for you.
An illustration depicts a woman holding a gift. Underneath it reads, buy yourself a present.
Buy yourself a present. Treat yourself to something that you love. I suggest choosing an object over an experience. Looking at it and or using this object will be a constant reminder of both your hard work and your acknowledgement of your efforts and success. You can also...
A stick figure woman holds a balloon with her face printed on it. Underneath reads, hold a retroactive celebration.
Hold a retroactive celebration. You don't have to limit yourself to celebrating things that happened recently. Just because your success was 10 years ago doesn't mean that you can't finally give it its due and celebrate it now.
We return to Denise.
Besides, people love parties and celebrations. Your colleagues and friends will be happy for the excuse to come together and to support you. Put together a potluck or a barbecue, host a dinner party or a gathering at a fancy restaurant, or go bigger and hold a more formal party. Whatever you do, make sure you bring in people who are important to you to share in celebrating you and your accomplishments. And then finally,
an illustration depicts a man and a woman sitting at a table. They cheer with glasses. The text reads, select your own achiever's choice.
There's achiever's choice. How would you most like to honor yourself? Choose whatever resonates the most with you and then commit to it.
We return to Denise.
Choose a day and a time and schedule it on your calendar so that it has as much importance as everything else that you block out time for. Regardless of the method that you choose, I almost guarantee that you will feel better when you acknowledge your accomplishment. You deserve it. Plus, with all of the celebrating going on, who has time to bother thinking about what others have done?
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
Imagine how different work would be if everyone showed up strong and confident about their ideas and their creativity. Sadly, because we're afraid of being judged, we censor ourselves and our ideas. We commit ideacide by dismissing and thus killing fledgling concepts, or we tone down our ideas to make them more acceptable. Much of the time, however, when we're afraid of being judged by others, it's because our inner critic has us judging ourselves first. Here's a couple of questions that will show you how your inner critic causes you to stifle your unique creative expression. Are you limiting your options because you believe that you should be different than how you are? Are you dismissing your creativity because it doesn't fit with how you feel that it should be?
On a white background, a sketch appears of a signpost with a pink arrow sign pointing right that reads, Future, and a purple arrow sign pointing left that reads, Past. A male stick figure next to it with short pink hair and purple pants gazes off to the right, with his mouth slightly downturned and his hand to his head. Underneath the illustration reads, Focus on the gifts and talents you have now.
One of the most important components of diffusing self-judgment before it spirals out of control is to accept who and where you are now and to see what gifts you have. The more you focus on appreciating yourself, the less attention you'll have available to harshly judge yourself.
We return to Denise.
You are a singular combination of talents, experiences, and wisdom that no one else in the world has.
An illustration of a stick figure woman with dark curly hair rises from below. She smiles.
There is only ever going to be one instance of you in the entirety of time and space.
We return to Denise.
Only one. This means that what you have to share with the world is your own and what only you can share. I encourage you to release self-judgment and to get in touch with those things that are unique to you and your creativity and to start to capitalize upon them and share them so that the world doesn't miss out.
The illustration of the signpost changes. The future and past signs are replaced with one sign reading, You. It points to the man who smiles and touches his chest. Below him reads, Your uniqueness advantage.
You do this through knowing your uniqueness advantage.
We return to Denise.
Because it's hard work to try to be anything other than who you are, the following 2 questions are designed to help you get in touch with the ways that being exactly who you are is ideal.
Words appear on a white background. How does being unique work to your advantage?
How does being unique work to your advantage? List all of the ways that being unique helps, not hurts you. And then second,
words on screen. How does being exactly who you are make things easier for you?
How does being exactly who you are make things easier for you?
We return to Denise.
List all of the things that would improve in your life if you stopped trying to suppress who you are. Remember, your uniqueness is your creative strength. Your experiences, perspectives, and knowledge is something that no other person on the planet has. When we start to banish our inner critics, we can amplify our creative contribution to the world. And as a bonus, we help to do the same for others, encouraging them to creatively express their brilliance as well.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
When we get into a place where we feel like we don't know enough or that we don't have enough expertise, we're suffering from deficiency anxiety. In this mode, we hold back the information that we do possess. You may feel that you still have so much to learn, but at this very moment, you have a lot of knowledge and experience that can be incredibly beneficial to other people. You are brilliant. Yes, you. Your brilliance is that which comes easily to you, but is so second nature that you probably dismiss it. What are the problems that you love to solve? What do you see clearly that other people struggle with? Tune into the talents that have been so easy for you and that you have built upon with additional knowledge and skill development over time. And then share this brilliance with the world.
An illustration depicts a glowing light bulb. Beside it, a title reads, "Share your brilliance." A point form list reads, "Knowledge that you have, and ideas that you are working on."
There are two kinds of brilliance that I encourage you to share. First is knowledge that you have, and second is ideas that you're working on, but are yet to be fully formed.
We return to Denise.
Sharing the knowledge that you do have, and believe me, you probably have more than you think, will help you to remember and solidify what you already know. Additionally, when you share your knowledge, you also amplify your professional value by establishing yourself as an expert. Sharing ideas that you're working on and that aren't fully formed can feel a little daunting, but it's through this process that you will both connect with your own creativity and you'll start to stimulate and leverage other people's creativity. Their ideas can spark yours and help your ideas to further develop and grow, and vice versa. Don't wait until you know everything about everything or have an advanced degree to share what is in that wonderful head of yours.
An illustration depicts two stick figures. A man and a woman smile as she shares a glowing star between them. Underneath them reads, "Be and share your brilliance."
Step up and give yourself permission to be and share your brilliance and expertise.
We return to Denise.
Here are 4 ways to start banishing your inner critic in the form of deficiency anxiety through establishing your expertise. 1.
Words appear beside Denise. The first word, write.
Write or blog on something that you're passionate about or what you're currently learning. Don't let the fact that you don't think you're an expert stop you. By writing and blogging and sharing information, you'll learn by default.
The second word, teach.
Teach. Take your knowledge and put it in the form of a lunchtime presentation, workshop, or training. Be sure to leverage the collective wisdom of the audience and to facilitate conversations so that others may share their expertise as well. The third
word, mentor.
Mentor. Make yourself available to someone junior to you so that you can share your hard-earned lessons and give guidance. When new people come into your team or department, offer to show them around and introduce them to key players. And then finally,
the fourth word, lead.
Lead. Take the lead on a project. Your invaluable input can help others to avoid problems in the long run.
The words disappear.
Every one of these suggestions will help you to feel more confident by getting you in touch with what you know while connecting with and helping other people.
Denise sits facing us in a workspace with a white brick wall and a wood desk.
Thank you so much for watching this course and for joining me on this journey. I had a fantastic time putting this all together for you. It is my hope that through this course, you'll start to shift into a place where you not only feel better about your creativity, but where you feel better about yourself as well. Because now you can see how powerful banishing your inner critic truly is. Please make an effort to put these tools to use, whether it's shifting focus from negative thoughts to positive ones, becoming your own coach of positivity, or finding the confidence to release self-judgment and share your ideas.
On a white screen, the title reads, "Learn more about me."
To find out more about my speaking engagements, consulting, or coaching,
Websites, denisejacobs.com, thecreativedose.com.
please visit my websites. While on my website, I encourage you to sign up on my mailing list where you can receive my somewhat sporadic but entertaining and informative newsletter.
Twitter and Instagram, at Denise Jacobs.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Denise Jacobs.
Facebook, facebook.com/denisejacobs.com.
And on Facebook at denisejacobs.com, all written out. And please do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well.